How's it going, everyone? Back again with another MRL Season 2 League race. This is our fourth race here, as you can see. We're at the Circuit Paul Ricard out in France. And yeah, this is a really good race. If you caught the Singapore race last week, you knew it wasn't the best race on my part, but this one is definitely a step up from that, so looking forward to it. Just pulling up the standings for the current season. You can see I'm in 4th place. I wasn't first prior to Singapore, but that was obviously a very bad race on my part, so I'm sitting 17 points back on T-ball. But jumping on board to my first qualifying lap here, I find that this first couple sequence of corners is the most difficult for me. You can see I go a little bit deep here and don't get on the throttle as soon as I'd like, as I always seem to invalidate my laps there. But as for this next part of the track, I find that I can really hook it up. I think I was running 2.7 wings, and it really gave me the downforce in these kind of technical sections to put the power down as early as possible and really keep that minimum speed as high as I can. But the only trade-off with that is that I'm a little bit slower in the straights. But for sections like this, I found that I was really able to keep it tight and really get the power down as quick as I can. So I think that's where I gained most of my time, so I made sure to focus on those points as areas in qualifying and during the race to really nail. And if I could nail those, I knew I wouldn't fall too far back when it comes to straight line speed, and I would make it up in the corners. Coming to this left-hander here, I found that I was always losing the rear, and found that I would have to really downshift slower than normal in order to keep it all together, to not have any kind of drifting, I guess. But as I come around the final corner here, I hook it up pretty well, and then it's just a drag race to the line. I end up doing a 1:28.5, which at the time was the fastest, so I was pretty happy about that. But I knew I'd probably have to go out again because I was going to be beat. And as you can see there, I was pretty much beaten as I'm going out for my second lap by Drix. As I'm sure you've seen in previous races, he is obviously incredibly fast, and he won that last race, so he's always going to be up there as a competitor, and he's always going to be one of the quickest guys out on track. But as I go out for my second lap here, coming to this first section, I actually hook it up a lot better than I did the first time. I like to keep it much tighter, and you can see my deltas rising like crazy, going up to 3/10, going up into this next set of corners here. Keep it nice and tight, try and keep it as close to the left, and then bring it back to the right, going down to second for rotation, then up to third. This part, I felt like with my downforce, I was able to keep down the power while I was turning and not really lift as much, but I guess I didn't do it as good as I did on my first lap. So I did lose a bit there. I'm still just over 1/10 up on my time. On this corner here, I don't put it all together as good as I can. I go out a little bit wide, so I kind of lift a little bit so I don't invalidate. But you can see that I'm actually putting in personal bests, but I'm still pretty much just even with my time. So I knew in this third sector I really had to send it, brake a little bit later, get on the throttle a little bit earlier. But I think it was in this corner, as I kind of mentioned in the last lap, I lose the car a little bit and drift out wide, and that's where I lose all of my time. So I'm not going to improve on this lap, but I do stay in P2, which is a good starting point for me. I'm on the front row, and I know that turn 1 here can be pretty hectic, so it's just a matter of staying ahead and not getting into any trouble. But with qualifying complete, you can see I was just 0.089 behind Drix there for pole, so really close battle. As for strategy here, I decided to go with the 2 stops, so soft, medium, mediums, and just didn't want to complicate things and keep it simple with the strategy that the game gave me. As we're on the grid here, formation lap has been completed, and we see our 5 red lights, and we're off. So that was a little bit long of a hold, but I get a pretty decent start. Drix also gets a good start, so I'm just trying to stay ahead of the guys behind and not make any mistakes going to this first corner. So I do go wide, and that compromises my position, and BHRL Adam capitalizes on that. So good on him for keeping it all together during that first kind of sequence of corners and getting ahead on track there. So my game plan now, I knew I didn't really have to rush anything. I knew I had some decent pace, so I wanted to make sure I was getting back to the strategy of being patient, saving my ERS, saving my fuel, and even saving my tires, so that when it comes to the end of the stint and the people ahead of me that are pushing, I have a little bit more pace in the tires, and then I could potentially overcut them after the first pit stop. So that was something that I wanted to keep in mind and have the option for. So you could see they're kind of actually getting ahead. So I really just wanted to make sure I was still in their DRS and kind of use them as a tow for the future laps and pretty much until the end of this stint. Coming into, I guess, the final corner here of the first lap, I was still in a pretty good position, just hovering around that 1 second mark behind BHRL Adam, and I could really tell that the two guys ahead of me, they were pushing really hard. I obviously wasn't using pretty much any ERS or much fuel at this point because I just wanted to save, and I knew I had the pace to stay within their range without using much of my ERS deployment. Continuing with the second lap of the race, you can see I went green in that first sector there, so I knew I had the pace, and I wanted to continue to see where this kind of second lap would place me, because I knew the guys ahead were pushing. I wasn't pushing all that hard. I did use some ERS there, but like I said previously, I wanted to save my tires. And another thing to mention, I wanted to get back to kind of pre-Singapore and not getting any warnings and really having that mindset of being able to stay as clean as possible but be fast, because at the end of the day, if you're able to stay clean and not get any damage or get any warnings or penalties, you can usually finish pretty high and get some good points. So I go green in the second sector again, and as I kind of come up to this last corner here, I'm really kind of starting to get closer and closer to Adam. So my pace is really good. I do use some ERS here and there, but as I cross the line, you can see I set the fastest lap of the race. So that kind of validated for me that I did have the pace. The way I was racing was good and pretty comfortable, so I just really wanted to lock in this pace for the remainder of this stint and make sure I can maintain it without overly pushing the tires and get a few extra laps out of these softs before heading onto the mediums. Fast forwarding here now to lap 7. Have been just continuing with that same pace, but I'm getting a little bit closer here, and I can kind of tell that the tires are starting to go off, and we're kind of getting near that first pit stop territory. So I knew, considering that I haven't been pushing all that hard, but the guys ahead of me were, you can see that I still have almost 100% ERS, so I really haven't been pushing all that hard, but these guys ahead were, and I knew that at some point their tires were going to fall off and their pace was going to start to go. But you can see that Adam tries to go for a pass here, but that kind of compromises him, and same with Drix. So I used some overtake to capitalize on that as he got slowed down, and that moves me back into kind of where I started this race, which was P2. So you can see my yellow indicator kind of just went off there, but this is, I think, earlier in this lap, Jeff was telling me to pit, or this is when the pit window was open, so I knew Drix was either going to pit this lap or next lap. So depending on what he was going to do would kind of dictate what I do. So he actually goes into the pits here, and I found this as a time to push harder than I have since the beginning of this race. I knew there was the potential to do an overcut, I did have really good pace behind them. I had a lot of ERS and a lot of fuel, so you can see I use ERS pretty much for that entire straight. And I don't think I actually ever go down into lean this entire lap, so I just keep it in standard and rich, and I do decide to box this lap. So I knew if I really wanted to overcut Drix, I had to put in a really strong lap. So as I come around this corner, I'm trying to go up into rich as quick as possible and get the power down, because this straight is really crucial and you can gain up a lot of time here. So again, throwing on the ERS to get as much speed out of the car as possible. The tire indicator is now kind of approaching that orange territory, so I knew that there was no more life left in these tires, and to be honest, they felt pretty good at this point. The softs, if you're able to take care of them, they can probably go 10 or 11 laps, but because I was doing that 2-stop strategy, I knew I had to get into the pits a little bit earlier to give myself time in the later stints to catch up to cars, because when I have fresher tires, and I think a lot of people were doing 1-stops, just soft to hards, I knew their tires would fall off quite a bit towards the end of the race. So getting in early and giving myself time to make those overtakes was really crucial. So I go into the pits here and I put in a really good lap, but now it was pretty much up to the game and I guess the virtual pit crew here to not kind of mess anything up. But they don't. I think everything goes pretty well, and as you can see, I'm kind of finishing up here in the bottom left corner. You can see Drix starting to come up, and I do the overcut, so I just get ahead of him, which worked out extremely well for me. And you can see he's actually on the hard tires, so he's committed to that 1-stop strategy, so going from those soft to hards, which a lot of people did in this race. And honestly, at this point of the race, and I think a little bit later on, maybe towards lap 18 or 19, that's when I was thinking I probably should have gone soft hards, because it was the faster strategy, just because you're really able to stay out of traffic and not get hindered by that. So coming out of this pit stop here, with Drix behind me, he obviously always has really good pace. I was on the faster tire, the newer tire, so I do decide to put in a really hard out lap here, and you can see I go purple in that middle sector, so really pushing it here to try and make sure to get out of his DRS and extend the gap between us. Moving on now to lap 10, I've extended the gap between Drix and I by about 1.7 seconds, so he's out of my DRS, and I'm coming up to Punju and Pogs, and Pogs goes a little bit wide, and I'm actually able to sneak in there and gain a position. So I think it was really crucial for me to get past there, because it puts a car between Drix and I think that really is able to extend the gap, and I was kind of just hoping Pogs can slow him down and keep him behind a little bit, because at this point in the race, Drix was my main competitor, I guess you can say, for the win of this race. So I was just hoping that I can extend the gap as much as possible. But as I come up to the back of Punju, going on to the start-finish straight here, there's no one really close to him ahead of him, so he doesn't have DRS. I'm able to use ERS and DRS to get by. He moves out of the way, which is great, and I gain another position there. So up into P4, next up would be Daffy and MB Jacobson. Starting back up here on lap 12, at this point pretty much everyone has pit. I think the people who started on the mediums just pitting now to go on to hards, I believe. And one of those people was Chuckmaster. He just actually fell down the screen there to 6th, but you'll see a little bit later on in the race that he had an excellent race, and with the pace that he has, really put him in a great position to win the race. So you'll see a little bit later on how the race plays out and how he kind of impacts it. I guess I'll just take the time right now and take the opportunity to say, if you guys have been liking these videos and you guys have been following around with the races this season, please hit subscribe and hit the like button, and even comment what you like, what you don't like. Any type of constructive criticism is great. I'm pretty new to making these videos, so any type of suggestions that or things that you would like is helpful, and it'd be great to have the challenge to try and put them in the videos or even make other videos about F1. So yeah, moving on to lap 17, back to the race here. I do decide to go on to my second set of mediums. So like I was kind of saying earlier, I thought it was really crucial to pit a little bit earlier, especially because it's the two-stop, to give myself time to make the overtakes, because like the last set of mediums I was on, I think they're only at like 30 to 40% tire wear, so there's definitely still a lot of life left in them. But if I were to have waited to lap 21 or even maybe even 22, it wouldn't have given me enough time to make those overtakes, and it wouldn't have given me an opportunity to win the race. As I come out of the pits here, T-Ball and MB Jacobson just get out ahead of me, and honestly the first thought that came to my head was, crap, I'm not going to get ahead of T-Ball, he's so quick. And this has kind of just ruined my race, but he is on older hards, and I do get DRS on him, so he tries to fight a little bit here by going the inside. I give him room, but I'm able to make it stick. The tires just has so much more grip, and Jacobson is kind of in the same boat there, where I just have so much more grip coming out of those corners. I go purple in the second sector again. So this is kind of going back to what I was saying in qualifying, where I knew I was strong in those technical sections, maybe not as strong in the straights, but if you're able to get good grip and good traction coming out of those corners, it makes a huge difference when you're trying to carry momentum onto the straights and make those overtakes when you have DRS to help you, or even some ERS left over. So I'm in a good position now. P7, next up is Tuan, and I think Chuckmaster ahead of him. As we move to lap 21 and I think 22 now, I do come up to the back of Tuan and BHRL Adam, so they're kind of fighting a little bit here, and I knew if I were able to stay back and kind of just let them squabble a little bit, I guess, that it would allow me to gain some time on them. They were both on harder tires, and I was on these fresh mediums, so I knew on this straight I should be able to get by, so I really focus on getting a nice strong exit here and get a good run on Tuan, which was really helpful, as I was using some ERS to just help me get by, because he still was in the DRS. He doesn't fight it all that hard, which is good, but you can tell by my ERS bar there, I've been pushing really hard, and I knew I had to if I wanted to catch up to the guys in front. I knew the tires would definitely get me to the end. It was just a matter of how much I can close the gap, and how quickly I could do it with only 5 laps remaining. With the pass done on Tuan, I come up just behind Adam again here. He was, if you remember, at the start of the race, just ahead of me for the first, I guess, 5 or 6 laps. And getting back to just at this point of the race, a few corners back, his red light was flashing, so I knew he was really low on ERS, and he didn't have DRS on the person in front, who is Chuckmaster. So I knew I needed to get past on this first corner here if I wanted to give myself a chance in the next 4 laps to catch up to Chuckmaster. And like I said earlier, Chuckmaster would play a big part in the end of this race, and I was pretty shocked, to be honest, to see him up there. Not shocked at his pace at all, but shocked that Drix wasn't there. I knew Drix had pit for those hards back when I first pit, but in talking to him after the race, he mentioned that he wouldn't have been able to make it to the end of the race on the hards he had put on. So I guess that was kind of fortunate for me, but not really, because Chuckmaster had put in an excellent first and second stint. I think he started, I don't think he was even in the top 10 at the start of the race, and as I've mentioned in races prior, he has really good pace, and on these hards he was putting down some amazing lap times, and I was actually finding it pretty hard to catch up to him. Luckily enough for me, he did have a 3-second time penalty, and at this point I don't think I've even gotten a warning, maybe one warning. I'm not 100% sure where I was at this point, but I knew if I was able to keep it clean for the remainder of the race and I guess put in some really good lap times, I should be able to get within his 3 seconds and win the race. But like I said before, I was finding it really hard to do so. As we come to, I guess, the latter section of lap 26 here, I knew I couldn't really make any mistakes coming onto this last lap here, and I wanted to try and save up some ERS so that I can use kind of towards the end of the lap, but it was getting really hard to save up any ERS when I'm just trying to make up as much ground as possible. But as you can see, as I cross the line here on the 27th lap, last lap of the race, I'm about 2/10 off of that mark where I'd be able to get into his 3 seconds. So I pretty much decided to throw it in rich and just keep it there for the rest of the race to give myself the maximum from the car and every possible opportunity to catch up to Chuckmaster and win the race. So I go green in that first sector. I put in a personal best, and you can see that I actually just dip into that 3-second area. So I'm hovering right around that area, so I just had to keep this up. And then kind of going into this next section here, you could see how low my fuel was getting. And I think actually coming onto this straight here is when I notice that if I keep it in rich, I'm not going to finish the race. So I actually have to dial it back to lean for these last few corners. But thankfully I was about 3.5 tenths clear of the time penalty area where Chuckmaster was. So as long as I kept it clean and kept it on the track, I should be good for the win. And you can see I was giving it everything as I go green again in that second sector and put in another personal best there. But coming up to the final corner here, 2.469 seconds behind Chuckmaster. It's just a matter of getting across the line, and that should be the win. But in the end, there it is. Absolutely crazy race. Really good race for myself. I feel like this was probably the most complete race I've had throughout the entire season so far, and it was definitely a nice comeback from what had happened in Singapore. So thank you for watching. I think next week we are at Suzuka in Japan, so should be another really good race. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.